Robert Wagner, 94, is accustomed to being in the public eye and the associated controversies. The tragic and unexplained death of Natalie Wood has been a topic of fascination for both fans and Hollywood for decades. Wagner has mostly kept quiet about what happened that fateful night, despite rumors and conjecture following him throughout his career. After remaining silent for years, Wagner has now spoken out, revealing information that may answer the issues many still have. What impact will his disclosure have on Natalie's legacy? Come along as we examine Wagner's open admission and how it relates to one of Hollywood's most persistent mysteries. The beginning. Two Norwegian immigrants welcomed Robert into the world in 1930 in Detroit, Michigan. Wagner failed one of his first screen tests as a teenager. Still, he was thrilled by the experience and became enamored with acting. Albert "Cubby" Broccoli, known for producing the James Bond film series, quickly became his attorney. The Happy Years in 1950 was his debut feature, which helped him land a deal with 20th Century Fox. Wagner's debut film for Fox was the World War II movie Halls of Montezuma. I started as an ingenue. I was 19 years old. I was the boy next door. But you always felt you could work up and have a better part in the next picture. Natalie Wood. Given how closely Robert's life and death are intertwined, it would be impossible to discuss Robert without bringing up Natalie Wood. When the 18-year-old actor showed off his attractiveness around the 20th Century Fox Studios in 1949, the two performers crossed paths. Natalie Wood, a 10-year-old child actor, quickly became interested in him. The very young celebrity, whose real name is Natalia Nikolaeva Zakharenko, started performing when she was just 4 years old. Young Natalie informed her mother, "I'm going to marry him one day," after seeing Wagner for the first time. She married him twice, and it may have been the end of her life. In Rebel Without a Cause, Natalie notably starred opposite James Dean. That sinking feeling. Wagner and Barbara Stanwyck got a part in the 1953 film Titanic. In his memoir, he later disclosed that he had a 4-year romance with Stanwyck, who was 23 years his senior. His studio linked him with 18-year-old Natalie Wood because they were concerned about the impact that connection may have on his reputation. However, this was not the only high-profile romance that Natalie had. When she was 15 and he was 38, Wood dated Frank Sinatra. Wood was pimped out to Sinatra at such a young age by her insanely ambitious Russian mother, who dressed her in a form-fitting black party dress and dropped her off at his apartment, according to a 2003 revelation from Sinatra's former aide. Natalie was already experienced. Wagner and Wood were a match made in heaven, and the public went crazy. Dashing Robert and gorgeous Natalie's appearance were the ideal combination to make them media darlings. When they went on a cross-country road trip, radio stations reported seeing the couple driving down highways so that fans could line the streets as they passed through American towns. It seems that Wagner was intimidated by Natalie's past relationships. Before Wagner, Wood had dated other superstars, such as the King of Rock and Roll, and then the infamous relationship with the sexy pop star Frank Sinatra. Critics ate them alive. Robert and Natalie Wood married in 1957 when she was 19 and he was 27. Although the Wagner and Wood partnership may have been a media sensation, critics criticized their first feature film together, All the Fine Young Cannibals, in 1960. Natalie starred in the critically acclaimed classic West Side Story the following year. Although the glamorous couple appeared to be living the ideal life, walking red carpets, posing on yachts, and sipping champagne, their relationship was turbulent behind the scenes, and they were always on the verge of splitting up. The Truth. In her book, Natalie Wood, The Complete Biography, 2020, author Suzanne Finstead disclosed that the shocking end of Natalie's fairy tale first marriage to Bobby Sock's idol, Robert Wagner, was the secret that was buried deepest in her closet of skeletons. To protect Wagner's image, Natalie publicly took the fall for their sudden divorce in 1962. She never refuted fan magazine gossip that her marriage to Wagner imploded over an alleged affair she had had with co-star Warren Beatty while filming Splendor in the Grass, Finstad said. The patently false gossip was reported as fact. Only a trusted few knew Natalie's account. Elderly women. Not that Wagner wasn't famous for his love of women. He's said to have dated a litany of Hollywood's top ladies, including Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, Claudette Colbert, Yvonne DiCarlo, Anita Ekberg, Shirley Ann Field, Laurie Nelson, Joan Collins, and Jill St. John. During his career, he also dated much older women, including Betty Davis, 22 years his senior, and Joan Crawford, 26 years older than him. Suicide attempt. When Finstad discovered her husband in bed with Cavendish, Natalie became hysterical and smashed a glass and fled, bleeding and in her nightgown, to a neighbor's house where she called her mother. Her sister Lana, who was 15 at the time, recalled Wood coming to the family home still bleeding and sobbing, telling them her marriage was over. Lana said Natalie shut herself in a bedroom and unintentionally overdosed on sleeping pills, and her parents rushed her to a hospital to have her stomach pumped. She never recovered from Wagner's betrayal, but he used a seat to keep his job. Following the divorce, Natalie underwent intense psychoanalysis, later joking that her therapy bills were at least the equal of the annual defense budget of most Central American nations. A second marriage. After their breakup, Wagner probably jumped back on the romantic bandwagon when Natalie discovered he was having an affair. While working in Europe, he reconnected with his old friend, actress Marion Marshall, who was well known for her roles with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. They made films in Europe for 2 years before marrying on July 21, 1963, and having a daughter named Katie Wagner. Wagner's career was in a slump, and playing second fiddle to Peter Sellers and David Niven in The Pink Panther wouldn't save it. At about the same time, Natalie Wood dated Michael Caine and David Niven's son. Back in the USA. I was opposed to doing Thief, but Lou Wasserman said, "I want you to be in TV Guide every week." Wagner's career was in ruins in the United States, so much so that he played Mr. Roberts for a week at a vacation resort outside Chicago. He was fortunate to support Paul Newman in Harper, but later that year, when he signed with Universal Studios, his fortunes turned around. I would have missed all that if I hadn't listened to Lou. This is your medium, you've got to try it, you'll be great. The play was an instant hit, and Wagner's career took off. Roland Kibbe wrote the part for me. These boots are made for walking. Wagner's career was booming, but his marriage was in ruins at home. He and Marion split up in June 1970, and that same month he got engaged to Tina Sinatra. Wagner loved hanging out at her father, Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs compound, but something soon had him singing Nancy Sinatra's most famous song while his boots were all over Tina. Meanwhile, Natalie Wood married British talent agent Richard Gregson in 1969. Still, the minute he found out about their 1972 divorce, he gave Tina her marching orders and invited the 6-month pregnant Natalie to his Palm Springs home. The couple shocked the world by attending the Oscars together, and Wood's sister said it felt like the whole world felt sentimental about this reconciliation. To celebrate, the happy, reunited couple boarded a boat. A romantic cruise. Wagner was traveling to Europe to promote the British thriller Madame Sin in 1971, which was the perfect excuse for boat-loving Robert to take Natalie on an old-fashioned Atlantic crossing. The two stars were happy in love again, but a storm was brewing on the horizon, and on the first morning of the crossing, terrifying 70-foot waves slammed against the cruiser, and they didn't let up for 4 days. After landing safely in the UK, they decided to get married again. Fear of water. Perhaps this is a good time to note that Natalie Wood already had a severe fear of deep water. "I've always been terrified, still am, of water, dark water, sea water," she told an interviewer in the 1970s. The QE2 trip was supposed to be romantic, but it only worsened her hydrophobia. Nevertheless, they borrowed a yacht called the Ramblin' Rose for their second wedding. held off Paradise Cove near Malibu. Guests attended the ceremony before the newlyweds sailed for their second honeymoon on Santa Catalina Island, where Wagner became so angry at Lana's husband for selling wedding photos to a tabloid that he stopped speaking to her for years. Challenger disaster. Wagner purchased a 60-foot yacht named Challenger in 1975, but the couple wasn't happy with the name. As any sailor knows, changing a boat's name is unlucky. Natalie loved a poem by William Wordsworth that used the word splendor, so they decided to call their new vessel Splendor. However, splendor had a deeper meaning as the word was used in Natalie's movie Splendor in the Grass, in which she was rumored to have had an affair with Warren Beatty. He was reminded every time Wagner stepped onto his boat whether the rumors were true. Heart to Heart. The roles have been turned upside down at this point in their lives. In 1981, he landed the lead opposite Stephanie Powers in Heart to Heart, a weekly TV serial that was one of the most popular in the early 1980s due to the on-screen chemistry between Wagner and his gorgeous redhead co-star. One day, Natalie and two of their children went to the studio to surprise Wagner on the Heart to Heart studio lot, where Wagner was filming a love scene with Stephanie Powers. The children started crying when Natalie and the girls arrived at the worst possible time. Brainstorming. While there were rumors that Wagner and Stephanie Powers were the new power couple in Hollywood, Natalie landed a part in the science fiction film Brainstorm with Christopher Walken, who had just won the Oscar for Best Actor for his performance in The Deer Hunter. According to Lana Wood, Natalie was smitten with Walken and possibly still feeling envious of her husband's relationship with Stephanie Powers, invited him to join them on the Splendor for Thanksgiving weekend with only the captain, Dennis Davern, present. Natalie flirted with Walken. The three actors took the dinghy into Isthmus Cove to have dinner after Captain Davern anchored Splendor near Avalon on Santa Catalina Island. As Natalie, Robert, and Christopher dined and drank at a restaurant, Wagner noticed that his wife was close to her new friend, and he probably thought that Walken was a threat to his marriage, pride, and ego. The restaurant staff recalled that the group had been drinking a lot, and by the time the three revelers returned to the Splendor, Wagner was wearing a lethal mix of alcohol, jealousy, and rage. Fateful night. The three actors returned to the yacht, and Captain Davern joined them. The night ended with a heated argument between Wood and Wagner, probably over her over-familiarity and touching of Christopher Walken. Wood's body was discovered floating near the boat's dinghy on the morning of November 29, 1981, approximately 1 mile from the Splendor. Blood samples showed that she'd been drinking heavily, and there were fresh bruises on her legs and arms, and an abrasion on her left cheek. The official version of events stated that an intoxicated Natalie Wood drowned while trying to board the dinghy from the yacht. But was that the case? Questioning. On paper, it was a clear-cut case of accidental drowning, but some things just didn't add up. Most notably, Natalie Wood's dreaded fear of water, particularly drowning. Why would someone try to get on a dinghy in the middle of the night if they were so terrified of deep water? Detectives had to cut short Wagner's first interview because of his emotional state, but during his second, he recalled that between Wood going to her room and checking on her, Walken had ventured onto the deck for some fresh air. Coroner to the stars. Natalie Wood had drunk 7 or 8 glasses of wine the night before she died, according to coroner Dr. Thomas Noguchi's autopsy, and some of the bruises might have been from a fall. However, the odd thing was that Noguchi downplayed Wood's high alcohol content, the bruises, and any other evidence that could have linked Robert Wagner to her death. Why was the coroner so opposed to blaming Wagner? Well, it turns out that Coroner Noguchi was already in hot water over the autopsy he conducted on actor William Holden, and he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. There was also one significant, sinister connection between the two deaths. The captain versus Wagner. The captain and case's key witness, Dennis Davern, is incensed over the sudden suspension of Wagner's inquiry as a suspect. "What's fair is fair, you know," he said. "Give Natalie not just a voice, but the peace of mind." This comes after the case was reopened in 2011 due to fresh information, and Detective Ralph Fernandez, retired after 11 years of pursuing Wagner, stated that the cause of death was drowning and other undetermined factors. Fernandez concluded in 2018 that Wood had been assaulted the night before she died. Wagner had refused to assist investigators and had continuously denied any involvement. Conversely, Davern is adamant that the evidence against Wagner is clear-cut and convincing. Two mysterious accidents 2 weeks apart. Now, this might seem like an odd coincidence, but Robert Wagner was familiar with William Holden. The elderly actor was Stephanie Powers, Wagner's heart-to-heart co-star, whom Natalie felt envious of because they had a tremendous on-screen connection. The fact that William Holden had also passed away inexplicably made the situation much stranger. On November 12, 1981, when intoxicated, he stumbled on a rug, cut his forehead on a bedside table, and bled to death. Natalie drowned 2 weeks after that. Is art being imitated by life? For both Mr. and Mrs. Hart and Stephanie Powers and Robert Wagner, was it a case of when they met, it was murder? Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. In the months after Natalie Wood drowned, Robert Wagner worked on damage control. The boat's captain stayed at Wagner's house and claimed he found it difficult to leave. The place was highly alarmed, and Wagner's bodyguards kept stopping him from leaving. Why was Wagner afraid to let Davern speak? How far would he go to keep the captain silent? Suddenly, Davern was getting offers for commercial acting roles and even a part in Heart to Heart. Then Wagner began giving Davern lump sums of money, which his friends thought he was paying him hush money to keep his mouth shut. What did the skipper know that he wasn't telling? Throughout the years, Davern teased the media that he had the inside scoop on the mystery, but he kept backtracking, saying he couldn't share the secrets. Wagner even blamed himself. In his 1986 biography, Wagner stated that Wood fell overboard while attempting to tighten the dinghy's rope because the sound of the smaller boat crashing into the yacht was keeping her awake. He wrote, "It was only after that it dawned on me what had occurred. After slipping on the steps, she hit her head against the boat. I only hope she was unconscious when she hit the water." In his later 2009 biography, Pieces of My Heart, Wagner openly acknowledged his intense sense of responsibility and self-blame for Wood's death, stating, "I would have done anything in the world to protect her," and acknowledging, "Yes, I blamed myself. I could have taken action if I had been present. Although I wasn't, a man ultimately takes charge of his loved one." Captain Davern. But so many things stand out. What about the violent argument, the cuts and the bruises, the flirting with Christopher Walken? Eventually, Captain Davern decided to speak up, and it took him years to tell his version of what happened that night, and the details were explosive. He now claims that after the three actors returned from dinner, they continued drinking, and Wagner smashed a bottle across the table and yelled, accusing Walken of attempting to steal his wife. Walken apologized and went to his room, while Natalie hurried off to hers. However, it wasn't quite over yet by any means. Explosive argument. After Wood and Walken left, Davern said he kept drinking with the semi-cuckolded husband. When Wagner went to check on his wife, he said he heard a fight as he'd never heard before. The couple was fighting, screaming, and throwing things at each other. And he later heard someone untying the dinghy lines. He said he found Wagner at the swim steps looking tousled and sweating as if he'd been in a fight. However, being 3 sheets to the wind, Captain Davern forgot about the argument, Wagner's unkempt appearance, and the fact that somebody had been tampering with the dinghy ropes. The two men continued drinking until they went to look for her, but she wasn't in Walken's room or anywhere on the boat. That's when Davern noticed the missing dinghy. Was Wagner the drunken voice? The captain proposed searching the water with floodlights and cruising around to find Natalie after Wagner and Davern raised the alarm at 1:30 a.m. Still, Wagner quickly shut down these suggestions, claiming he didn't want other nearby boaters to know anything was amiss. One couple on a boat anchored near the Splendor heard a woman yelling, "Help me, please somebody help me." They also listened to a male voice respond, "Okay honey, we'll get you," but thought it was just late-night revelers playing in the water. Could that man's voice be that of Robert Wagner? If so, why didn't he help his drowning wife out of the water? The mystery remained for nearly 40 years. Person of interest. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau reopened the investigation into Natalie Wood's death in 2011 after many new witnesses came forward to dispute Wagner's contradictory statements. Following Davern's updated testimony, people felt something was wrong with the original investigation, and 700 people, including Captain Davern, signed a petition in 2011 expressing their dissatisfaction. The majority of people suspected Wagner of killing his wife. The coroner changed the death report's wording from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. Nearly 40 years after Natalie Wood drowned, investigators named Robert Wagner as a person of interest in 2018. The aftermath. Less than 3 months after his wife's death, on Valentine's Day 1982, Robert Wagner resumed dating. But this time he didn't date Stephanie Powers. Instead, he dated Diamonds Are Forever Bond girl Jill St. John, whom he'd known since the 1950s. They were married in 1990 and they remained together. Robert Wagner continued to act, and even though he had some success as Dr. Evil's #2 in the Austin Powers trilogy, his career will always be marred by his role in Natalie Wood's death. Legacy. The documentary, Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind, was produced by Natalie's daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner, who adopted her stepfather's name in 2020. Lana Wood is separated from her nieces because she believes Wagner was involved in her sister's death, while Christopher Walken insists it was a tragic accident. In recent years, skipper Dennis Davern sensationally revealed Natalie was terrified the entire trip and knew she was going to be murdered. Robert Wagner's role in Natalie's death will remain a secret until, hopefully, the truth is eventually revealed. And until then, some people will have suspicious minds, just like the fine young cannibal said. Opening up. The loss also shattered us, and we were hanging on to each other, Robert revealed candidly of Natalie's passing in an exclusive interview with People magazine in 2016. Despite being estranged from her aunt, he maintains a tight relationship with Natasha, as discussed in the interview. To keep these sisters' unity, Wagner continued to raise Natasha after Natalie passed away, just as he had done previously. "I have a very, very strong bond with Natasha," he remarked of her. "She means the world to me. We've remained close." Where is he now? Robert's life seemed to have entered a dark period recently. When he was 90 years old, it was discovered that he had dementia. Jill St. John, his wife, has been spotted in a wheelchair and looking sickly. In addition, his daughter Courtney Wagner had relapsed and is no longer sober despite her father's request to return to treatment. According to a close friend, Courtney is still struggling with alcohol and prescription drugs. Robert is at a loss for what to do. He's made every effort to help her stay sober. Courtney has also had difficulties losing her fiancé in a motorbike accident and running afoul of the law. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon